and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten, and with me after the Wolves season ends unceremoniously on Friday night is Leo Sun. Leo, how you doing?
The third straight year, Ryan. It feels like we've been here. 2 years ago when it happened, I was in Minnesota for that game, the game 5 against the Mavs. The only time I had to fly into Minnesota was for that. And then last year, we had Ant in the locker room talking about they just kind of whooped our ass. And then now this year we get Ant saying goodbye to the Spurs 8 minutes with 8 minutes left in the game, creating some unnecessarily stupid talking points. But as sad as I am that the Wolves' unlikely playoff run has come to end, kind of glad as well too. I mean, it's taken a lot out of a lot of us, I think, this whole season, even this playoff run, and I think we all kind of knew where the Wolves were in terms of championship contention. And so with that said, I think it ended at perfect time because, as I've mentioned a couple other episodes, I'm now just under 2 weeks away from my child arriving. So it comes at a good time. I can finally turn off the Wolves and be a little bit more happy now as we head into a new chapter of my life.
Yeah, well, I would have preferred the scheduling inconvenience for me of you having your baby and me having to find a replacement podcast while the Wolves are in the NBA Finals. We'll settle for the extra time off. I guess we don't really have a choice. But yeah, like Leo said, the Wolves lose by 30 points to the Spurs at home in Game 6. It's the third time they were blown out in the series. We'll talk about it, but it certainly put to bed kind of any thought of like, well, the Wolves could have won the series if XYZ go right to me, because I don't know, they got outscored by what, 90 something. I think that's right, 90 something points in the series. They just we'll break it down, but like it just wasn't that close. And obviously it brings up a lot of questions just about the roster, about the state of the Timberwolves and the league, and but let's kind of dig into the Spurs series specifically before we kind of hop into off-season mode. While we still have some basketball to break down, right? There'll be plenty of time to, and we'll spend some of that time here, but there'll be plenty of time to work out the trades. And but yeah, the Wolves Game 5 we already talked about that game, just get absolutely trounced in Game 5. And I think we both kind of felt like there was two ways Game 6 could go, one of which we saw play out. And the other was that the Wolves would show some fight and really like not let this happen again. But unfortunately for the third straight season, they're blown out. And kind of my overarching thought is, I don't know, to me, it's complicated that I think they were kind of dead on arrival coming into this series, and specifically because of Ant being hobbled and Dante being out on a certain level. It's hard to really like get too much on them for the series because I'm not sure they really had a chance. I kind of feel like the only reason this series went 6 is because Victor tried to decapitate Nas Reed. Kind of feels like if Wemby keeps his cool there, that they win that game and the series in 5. Obviously, the Wolves deserve some level of credit for getting up under his skin in that way. But the Wolves. This happens a lot in the NBA where a team win games one unexpectedly, and it kind of has no barometer on the rest of the series. And in many ways, in the games that Wemby didn't get kicked out, the Spurs swept the Wolves after Game 1. So yeah, I think the injuries were just too much to overcome, while also kind of simultaneously believe those didn't matter either because they never really played nearly well enough to even come close to winning the series.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I tried to be optimistic heading into this one, given how the Wolves responded to injuries and just being the underdog in the first round series against the Nuggets. And even with Ant announcing that he was going to, or being announced, or the news breaking Ant was going to return for Game 1 out of nowhere, seemed like there was maybe a path. And obviously they steal Game 1, despite Wemby having 12, technically 8 blocks in that first game. But it was clear by Game 3 that they were outmatched, like you said. I mean, the Wolves barely had enough juice to squeeze by a Wemby-less Spurs in Game 3. Took a miraculous kind of late comeback for them, and then they got crushed in 4. It all just kind of went downhill from there. I mean, 5, I guess, was maybe, I think, kind of close. I forget which. No, 5 wasn't close, 6 wasn't close. I think 4 was a little close, but we won 4, lost 5 and 6. Sorry, I'm getting that right. So anyways, all that said, yeah, the Wolves got crushed a lot, and it sounded like, at one point after the Wolves had won Game 4, Ant had just dropped a second straight 30-point game. it looked like maybe he was progressing towards, all right, well, are we getting, normal amp back, or at least like 90-95% amp back? But I think in retrospect now, it looked like those 2 30-point games were just his like kind of last gasps and using up all the rest of, whatever gas he had left in the tank in his knees, as opposed to like, he was progressing back. And so he did talk about in the exit interview about how he needs to get his body right, his hips and ankles and knees obviously all right during the offseason. And Finch talks about, this is the first time Ant has really had to face these types of severe injuries. And so it's been an experience for him. And so, yeah, I think with that said, all credit to the Spurs. I mean, there wasn't really very many areas that the Wolves, if any, were better than the Spurs at, when it all came down to brass tacks. I mean, they were outmatched in the perimeter, interior, on defense, and on offense. I don't want to say, they were outcoached. I just felt like the Wolves maybe just didn't have, obviously, the full complement of players and options that they had, even just given, Dante and, and Nas obviously was getting a little bit, heating up by the end, but he was still, mostly injured, as well as Io. We don't know what percent he was operating at either. So yeah, all things considered, I don't want to say it was, decimating to me to lose that epically in the last 2 games of the season. But, it was a thing where we know, like last season, what we had to try and beat moving forward. And even if we did beat the Spurs, we'd have to run to that buzzsaw again of the Thunder this year. So I think not that much has changed other than what I think is good, and we'll talk about later, but some clarity about what's missing on the Wolves roster, or in terms of their makeup moving forward, and maybe what some of the glaring problems are.
Yeah, and going back to the Denver series, I think that was the biggest positive, big picture from winning that series, was getting the opportunity to get more data points on what the roster, what the good parts of the roster, the bad parts of the roster, even if, like, I do believe this, like, the injuries were never going to allow them to win this series, just flatly. And that's not really an excuse, because like I mentioned earlier, they didn't play well enough either, even if they did have their guys healthy. I think that's kind of something that I've seen that I would push back on, is like, well, if the Wolves would have been healthy, they would have won the series. And maybe they did, maybe they could, but I don't know how you could watch that series and be like, well, definitely if Ant was healthy and Dante was in there, they would have won. They got trounced. This was a blowout. As big as, I mean, I think this is even true. It's like the biggest, for a series that wins 6 games, it's the biggest blowout series in maybe NBA history, but certainly like as big as anything you'd see. Like, the Wolves are not close to winning this series. They were closer to beating OKC last year somehow. They were closer to beating Dallas 2 years ago. But like I said, a lot of people take that to like, now the Wolves window is closed, they got no shot. And I don't believe that either. Like, I think the Wolves, I think if the Wolves had played up to their capabilities, had all their guys, or next year you make some moves that your team is better, like, I don't think, I'm not like, obviously OKC and San Antonio are going to be very, very good for the next 2 years, for the next many years. And that's going to be the barometer that, like, you judge your team against, is how well you compete against those teams. And even if the Wolves had the opportunity to move the Eastern Conference, that would be a very beneficial thing for them to do, especially watching Cavs Pistons, that series. I think the Wolves could have made the finals in a healthy version of their team if they were in the East. I don't know if they're better than the Knicks, but every other team in that conference, I would feel pretty confident in the Wolves beating. So I don't know. It's a lot of different things running through my head. I wrote an article that came out today with the thesis that, like, yes, they kind of all the wishy-washy stuff I just talked about now, but like, even you just set all that aside, and given their performance during the regular season, one that they didn't take seriously, like, the Wolves never had a chance to win the title. Like, their season ended Friday night, but it really ended months earlier, when multiple times during the season they hit rock bottom and refused to take, at every single step of the way, they refused to take the regular season seriously and build the habits you need. It sounds cliche, but I think on some fundamental level, this is true. It's like, you just have to build those habits during the regular season. And we saw in this series, and honestly during OKC series last year, that when the times got tough and the other team was the better matchup, or had the matchup advantage, when all of that happened, the Wolves were just not equipped strategically, mentally, all that stuff, to counter it. And so to me, it all ended there. It all ended. I specifically pointed out in this article to the New Year's Eve loss to Atlanta that I was at. And like Rudy had the money quote to me. He was like, do we care? Do we care about this stuff? Or are we just going to make millions of dollars, play basketball, and have fun? And certainly they did care, but like not enough. Not enough during the regular season. So a lot of that stuff kind of running through my head, but ultimately the Spurs are just a better team, and especially like Wemby is just a monster, and everything flowed through that. And they just never found an answer to score nearly enough points with Wemby on the court, and even the offensive lineups that they did kind of find little bits of success with, those weren't nearly good enough defensively, and that was, to me, that was the story of the Spurs series.
Yeah, I mean, I think multiple things could be true. I mean, as you said, that the Wolves not building those habits, and even Ant, finally saying that, seemingly admitting to that in his, post-game / exit interview, saying that, they didn't build the habits during the regular season. That's kind of what caused the downfall. That could be true. And at the same time, the Wolves can also flip a switch as well, too, which they did in the first round. And, that
but
can
you
also
can't
be...
flip a switch 4 straight times.
No,
that's
exactly.
my point.
That's what I'm saying. That multiple things could be true. Is that, like, yes, I mean, they could flip a switch and they could be a very, you could say a talented Denver Nuggets team with one of the best players in the world, top 3 player in the world. But at the same time, that caps your ceiling, right? Like, you can't just flip a switch to a championship. You can flip your switch to a second round. You can flip your switch maybe to a conference finals like the Wolves have done before. But when it really comes down to it, I mean, the habits also need to have built, which wasn't there, which seemed to kind of cap, I guess you could say, their ceiling a little bit in terms of, when things get tough, how do they do that? Now, the Wolves, again, we could talk all we want about the injuries, which, is a true thing, but they lost, like you said, to a very, very good Spurs team led by a player that's, unbelievable, not even close to his prime yet. And, the Spurs are one of the top 2 teams, one of the top 4 teams left in the NBA that are, in the playoffs, and they're not number 3 or 4, that's for sure. So, it's not like they lost to a lesser team, I would say that. And so, you could call that maybe silver lining by me, or just kind of some copium. But it is what it is. And like you said, I do agree that the Wolves have to take those habits more seriously during the regular season, because that will matter as they're facing, one of those top 3 teams in the NBA, whether it's in the second round or whether it's in the conference finals or even in the finals as well, too.
Yeah, I kind of, big picture, I think it's true. Like, this is a series where you look yourself in the face and go, we're not good enough. And even... it's like setting aside my regular season thing, even regardless of that. Like, even if they did take the regular season seriously, I think this was their ultimate ceiling. Like, if they had taken the regular season seriously, they would have gotten to this series. They would have been the 3 seed. They would have gotten to this series, and they would have lost in a similar fashion, especially if Ant gets hurt like he did and Dante gets hurt like he did. I think, just to give my article one more plug, is like, but they never gave themselves a chance. Like, they never, even if they did get the right matchup, even if they were in like the Eastern Conference, like they never gave themselves a chance. And that's like kind of the complicated feelings it's like they never gave themselves a chance for the regular season. The injuries never gave them a chance. And then they got to a matchup where even if both of those things had gone right, they certainly lose. And that, I think, maybe the biggest thing I think this proved is just the Randall Gobert pairing in a front court just doesn't work. It flatly is not good enough to win a title. And I'll say up front, like, winning the championship is not the only signal for a successful season. And certainly from a fan point of view, it should not be the only thing that makes you enjoy a season. I think it's hard to say this season was a success, and certainly harder to say it was a failure. But like, it was an enjoyable playoffs, at least I would say, at least for the first 6 of the games. But I think like that's just the biggest thing, is that Wemby just torched that 2-man pairing of Randall and Gobert. Obviously we'll talk about Randall, but like Gobert was just, and it wasn't even a series, like OKC series. I thought like Rudy deserved a ton of blame for that. This series, it wasn't even like Gobert played bad necessarily. It was just a matchup.
Yeah, he got outplayed.
It was just a matchup from hell for him. And for, I think just more broadly, any team that goes up against that team with a center that I wouldn't even say can't shoot, but like is not, like, if I said this to my dad, like if Gobert had Randall's offensive game, that would have worked, in the sense of like Randall, even if he doesn't shoot, take away the 3-point shooting, the streaky part of it from Randall, like if Gobert could knock down mid-range jumpers like Randall does, like that would have just even been enough. Or like the ability to catch and finish better than all of that. So I don't think any team is going to be able to beat the Spurs without a big guy that can at least slow down Wemby while also getting him at least partially out of the paint. And Gobert really guarded Wemby fine, but like just on offense, it was just not even Wemby was just sitting at the paint the entire series.
We'll have news for you, Ryan. In 2 years, hopefully we won't have to worry about facing Wemby in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think it's going to take longer than that.
Yeah, if the Wolves move, right? Now, I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it is also kind of the truth. I mean, if that is what happens in the future, I mean, then that'll be a different problem to have. But, you know, I do agree with you, you know, for a lot of that. I also want to add that I think should Tim Conley and the Timberwolves be trying to build their team to beat the Spurs, right? Now, I know, like, obviously, you know, in the micro, you know, right now in the short term, we're like, oh, man, like, how are we going to get over this hump? You know, how are we going to get over this hump? And the fact of the matter is that there's going to be some other team that might rise up somewhere else. Maybe Jokic joins the Warriors, or I don't know, whatever stupid, you know, like other, like you pair 2 of the top 5 players, 2 of the top 10 players together all of a sudden. And now there's a new team that, now the Wolves got to think about them as well, too, where, you know, I think there's a lot of things that have to happen. And I think as of today, right now, the Wolves just clearly didn't have an answer for Wemby, and that's okay. I would say there's probably 28 other teams in the NBA that also probably don't have an answer for Wemby. Right now, we'll find out soon next week if there is a team that does have an answer for him, or at least solving him. And so, you know, with that said, I think it's okay that, you know, I'm not Rudy's biggest fan. I'm not pining for Rudy to stay here forever or even be a part of the team next year. But Rudy getting outplayed by Wemby is kind of like, you could be, you know, a Donovan Mitchell, you could be a Jason Tatum or whatever, but still get outplayed by a better player in your position, whether it's, you know, a SGA or whether it's Giannis or whatever the case is. Like, there's always, you know, we don't expect Rudy to be the best center in the league. And so there's always going to be players, especially a player like Wemby, that is going to be able to make him look bad. And that's okay. I mean, Rudy is not in his prime. We know where he is now. And, even, you know, his salary's kind of started to, you know, go down a little bit, which is helpful. But anyways, yeah, all that to say, you know, I think all respects to the Spurs. I'm not saying you are, but I definitely am not in any type of doomerism where I'm like, oh, we'll never get there, you know, kind of thing. I think there's a lot of things that, you know, might happen this offseason, which we'll talk about later. But right now, yeah, it is a tough look because it looked like Wolves had no answers at all, really, anywhere, especially with the way Ant was hampered, and we did have one of the best shooters in the NBA, one of the best motion off movement, you know, shooters in the entire league with Dante out.
To your point earlier, I think I talked about this, Pat, in maybe after game 1 or 2, that like the Wolves had a chance to win this series, or I thought so at the time, if games 1 or 2 were like the worst Ant was going to look, and like games 3 and 4, like if you could just keep building on it. To your point, obviously I think game 5 and 6 he probably looked better than games 1 and 2, but like ultimately I thought his knees started to look worse throughout the series instead of better. And so, I mean, look, like, even if they had gotten through San Antonio, I think OKC would have just absolutely destroyed them. Partially because of the similar matchup advantages that the Spurs had, but also just like that series, both of these conference final series are every other game. Like Monday, like the West Finals goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so on. Like not a single extra day throughout the series, and the Eastern Conference Final starts Tuesday and goes Thursday, Saturday from there. So that was like without Ant being at greater than like 80+% of what he was, there was another, like, they just needed Ant to go supernova, and they kind of got it in games 3 and 4, and really not a criticism of him, but like just never got it because of the injuries. And that's a bummer. But also why I was grateful that they were able to get through the Denver series, one that they clearly were the better team of, and I was happy that injuries might have stolen a more fun series against San Antonio, but it didn't ultimately seem to affect how far they end up getting, and the Wolves, at least for another season, get bragging rights over the Denver Nuggets. But Leo, I think I've talked enough about the series. Leo, do you have anything else on the San Antonio series before we kind of transition into the long off season?
No, I mean, I'll just say this to the Spurs. I mean, like, they're a team that, for the most part, I like a lot of their players on their team. I think individually, Wemby's kind of heel turn with the whole Nas thing, I mean, was kind of annoying, and obviously seeing him kind of fall down a ton is not fun. Stephon Castle's flopping has been quite a bit annoying as well, too. But, I mean, I can assure you, Wolves fans, I mean, we were just there last year. If the Wolves were playing the Thunder in the second round instead, there would be a lot more annoying shenanigans and narratives out there. That said, I still like a lot of the Spurs players, and I would be rooting for them. I mean, moving forward, I do feel that I love Dylan Harper, not just because he's half Filipino. I like a lot of how the way they play, the aggressiveness they play with, and I think Wemby, especially as a human being, is a really great person that I'd like to kind of see in a young superstar. So I'll be rooting for them, the Western Conference at least.
Yeah, and to your Castle point, the one big adjustment the Wolves did make in Game 6 was to switch to the defensive matchup, putting Randall on Wemby and Rudy on Castle, and Finch admitted this after the game. It just didn't work.
It did not.
I didn't. I think there was far more problems writ large with that game, so it is what it is. But yeah, Wolves tried to make an adjustment. Can't fault them for that, but did not work whatsoever. But yeah, let's move on to the offseason. And the big first question I wrote down is like, just where do the Wolves go from here? Obviously, like we've talked about, like it's really the third straight season, I think, that while the Wolves have been, I don't know what number they were, the fifth best team this year, sixth, third, whatever, that general area team this year. Who knows how they would have stacked up in the East. Last year, similar. They were fourth, fifth. Year before that, they were third or fourth. Like they've been one of the six best teams in the NBA going 3 years running, and probably argue third or fourth all of those years. But the on the flip side, they were also a clear step behind the top team or two in the league. 2 years ago, you could argue about, obviously Dallas beats them bad, but like I think even if they get through that series, Boston was the supreme team in the NBA in 2024. Last year, obviously, they get waxed by Oklahoma City. I kind of think Indiana would have beaten them in the finals too if they had gotten to that. And then this year, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, and maybe even the Knicks let's set the Knicks aside. The top two teams in the West were clearly better than they were. And so I guess the biggest question I have is, what kind of path should the Wolves go on? I think obviously the first one that I've seen way too much of is like blow it up, trade Ant, you're never going to win it. That I think is insane. That makes no sense. So I'm not even going to posit that to you as a potential. But between kind of going all in again, trading every pick you have, trading every young guy out, like really pushing all in, trying to make the best possible team for next year, or shout out Kyle Tigey having a quote unquote gap year next year. And it's not that you would basically kind of not running back, but like having a similar quality team next year in pursuit of 2 to 3 years from now, kind of regrouping there. Maybe San Antonio and Oklahoma City have dropped off, and you make a trade that 2 to 3 years from now, that's when you kind of reemerge as like a true title contender again. What do you think about both of those paths?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and one that we have all the time as Wolves fans. It's I think we have a little bit of I don't know what the right term is for it, but like we've seen so much losing in our fandom and however many decades they've been around now, and now that we're experiencing, like you said, us being a top 4 team by all accounts for 3 years in a row, top 2 teams in the West 2 years in a row, now top 4 team this year. So basically a top 4 team for 3 years in a row. Like, we want to hold on to that. Like, I want to hold on to that. Like, I would love, if you could tell me for the rest of the time the Wolves will always at least be a top 4 team in the West, I'd be like, yeah, that's great. Like, I would love that. And so, why risk like blowing it all up like we saw when, let's just go young with Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns and Zach LaVine. Like, let's just ride with that. And we've seen that not work out before. But, that being said, I do feel like personally myself, I think it is time for an all-in. The Wolves have kind of spun their wheels, a couple of times now, and different varying iterations of who they are with their core of Ant, Jaden, and Nas being the main core, I guess you could say. And they've had good, but not the perfect, not the outright final goal that they want to achieve. And so, for me, I mean, I think it depends on what you determine as all in. Does that mean trading any non-amp player, like you're saying, like any young guy, any future pick to get a player who's going to more help them win this upcoming season? Maybe. If so, then who's even available this summer? Like, who's realistic in that? Is it Giannis again? Is it Kawhi that allegedly Tim Connelly made some calls about this trade deadline? Is it Kyrie that I've seen some rumors about and some interest in? I mean, obviously trading Jaden isn't ideal. We've seen kind of him up his game this regular season, especially as a shooter and two-way player. And we've seen him up his game in the playoffs, especially mainly in the first round at least. So that's not ideal, but if I gun to my head, if I had to pick one, I'd be willing to part with any non-Jaden piece and assets for those players. So I guess any non-Jaden or non-amp piece and any assets, future draft picks for those three players I mentioned above. Now, is that likely we'll net one of them without Jaden? Probably not. So, I'm not sure I would include Jaden, for one of those three players, but I'm curious, just talking about those specific three players, all right, that I bring up. So Giannis, Kawhi, and Kyrie, three very, very different players at different kind of parts of their career. I mean, all in their 30s. Would you trade Jaden for any one of those three or none of those three?
I think Giannis is the only one that you really think about. Say it again. Say the other two.
Giannis, Kawhi, and Kyrie.
Yeah, Kawhi and Kyrie are not. Those are guys I'm more looking for. Like Kyrie would only be Julius and even then I'd be worried about it. Kawhi, certainly a Julius for Kawhi swap would be a gift for the Wolves.
Sure.
Kind of even. Julius and the contracts, I think you'd have to staple Dante's deal, but like Dante and Julius for Kawhi, plus like the one first round pick they could trade that'd be an interesting deal. And then I think Giannis, there's been a lot of worrying stuff with him since the Wolves kind of tried to get him at the deadline. I lean too much into this, but the Kalshi thing kind of worries me a little bit where he's at. Certainly what Miles Turner said about him always being late to the plane. Now, let me preface this. I have not heard anything about any of the Timberwolves players. I have not heard any of that. Would it surprise me if certain Timberwolves players were consistently late for their own team plane, specifically the Wolves' best player? No, that would not surprise me. But again, that is not something I've heard. I just, before I ridicule Giannis for it, like want to say that up front. Like that's worrying, and certainly the injuries, but like, I mean, obviously if you could get him like Jaden and Julius for Giannis I think it'd be too much to pass up. I don't think that gets it done. So like if you're having to throw in Rudy or whatever, like you're rerouting picks, all that, I just think ultimately a team is going to be able to outbid for Giannis, and certainly would be able to do so in a less complicated fashion, where the Wolves are trading these guys. Certainly the Bucks don't want Rudy and Julius. That doesn't make much sense for them. So it'd be very difficult. But I think I'd be more willing not to wait 2 or 3 years, but like I don't have a huge issue with like just keeping the team at the current level of competitiveness. Maybe you get lucky with the matchup. You're back in the West Finals. Maybe, who knows? Like the team is still very, very good. And I think some fundamental things about the team, regardless of the roster, could change. Like what I mentioned, like taking the regular season seriously, or just like finding better players that fit, even if you're staying at the same talent level. I just think broader, just make a deal that makes sense, and make a deal where you're not losing out on value, that don't stretch yourself, don't force it. And this was what they did last offseason. I don't think they necessarily loved the idea of bringing back Randall and Nas and losing Nikhil and that be their whole offseason, but I think they looked at it and they didn't want to lose player value and roster value, so they kept the path. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. I think trading Randall would be the only thing I think that'd be more of a priority. Kind of talk about why later, but other than that, I wouldn't be in a huge hurry to trade anyone, but continuing to like try to like, can you get an undervalued player for less than where it feels like you're gaining assets, gaining value instead of losing them. And I don't even mean like draft assets. I'm just saying like if you're upgrading if you're trading player for player and you feel like you're getting the better side of the deal, do that. If that means trading fundamental pieces of the team, aside from Ant and aside from Jaden, like do that. But don't make it the only goal of the offseason. Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get you. And so, just to clarify, so you said you would potentially consider trading Jaden only for Giannis, not Kawhi, not Kyrie, correct?
Potentially for Giannis.
Potentially, right? Given the package.
Yeah, potentially given what the package is, and I would probably lean no for Giannis, not like in a straight up deal, but like given what I think it will end up costing Giannis, I don't want to trade Jaden plus a lot of other things. If that makes sense. But obviously, if it was, I don't know, I think the salaries would work. Like if it was Jaden plus Dante for Giannis, and that was the only thing you were sending, like of course that'd be obvious. But like, and even or just swap out Jaden and Julius for Nas for Jaden and Julius for Giannis straight up is obviously a deal. I think if people aren't willing to do that, I think you're not being realistic. You're not being realistic.
Yeah, right.
And I say that because that package will not be nearly good enough to get Giannis Antetokounmpo.
So back to your original question of like, would I rather go in, for the next couple of years or regroup and, stick around for 2 or 3 years and, maintain that flexibility to kind of go in later. I said before the trade deadline during the first Giannis saga, the first of seemingly like a million, that I felt like the 2 to 3 year development window for the Wolves is something that I liked. Like I liked their chances of developing, that core, surrounding them with more talent, and then winning potentially in the future. But I do like the Giannis / win now window more. Like if we were able to get Giannis, someone of his caliber now. Again, are the Wolves even in the stratosphere for competing with other deals? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But I do like that because I feel like the Wolves have kind of turned their wheels a little bit a lot of times with this core. And like, there's in a couple years, we're no longer going to be talking about, oh, well, Jaden and Nas and Ant are still young. Like at this point, they're like fully in their primes, if not, going to be, start their decline on their prime, in 2 to 3 years from now. And, we can't really use that youth excuse anymore. And so at that point, it's like, all right, well, then now are you going to get less assets back? So you want to move, a Jaden in the future, say 3 years from now versus Jaden now. I don't know. But I will say, you talk about, how are we going to get over the hump with San Antonio or get over the hump against OKC, last year. You think about how those teams built their current roster and that construction. I'm not saying we could just easily redo what they're doing, especially just given like the draft lottery reforms, but I do think the draft lottery reforms do maybe kind of help. I'm not saying the Wolves should be missing the playoffs, but look at how they got to where they got. They got Stephon Castle, Wemby through the draft, as well as Dylan Harper and Wemby being like very, very lucky for them to get those two players, just given the odds of it all. And so you look at OKC, who was able to get Chet, and obviously they did a good job scouting and getting Jalen Williams. So they built a lot of that because they were able to have an all-star, all-NBA level player. In this case, the Spurs getting Fox, who's technically was all-NBA, but obviously not to the level of SGA. But you were able to pay for like a star player, all-NBA player, while supplementing them with young players that aren't making max money yet. Now the Wolves don't really have that right now. Like TJ, love him, he's great. Hopefully he grows, but he is not a a Dylan Harper. He is not I don't want to say like a Jalen Williams. Like he's not like at that level where it's like, oh well, on the rookie scale contract, we really got him at a huge bargain. Like the Wolves need to be able to maybe, if they want to follow that game plan of building for like, oh, you got almost dynasty on your hands, and they need to be able to have that. And the Wolves just we don't have the draft assets right now, and they're really not in position to tank either. So I don't know. I say that just to say that, like, if the Wolves are just kind of like, all right, well, let's kind of stay grounded, like you said, 2 to 3 years, keep the core together, and then kind of build around that later, then maybe, they could luck into a draft pick. I would say 2 to 3 years from now, if the Wolves are losing in the conference finals or even in the second round for a couple more years, Ant is going to be, creeping up to that third contract there. And that third contract time is typically when superstar level players are, looking to take destiny into their own hands and find, okay, well, let me find a better situation for me, whether it's a different conference or a different team or whatever the case may be. And that I think that's the last thing the Wolves should want is for Ant to even consider thinking that, okay, well, my front office isn't making moves to win now, and it's time for my contract to be up. I made the money I needed to make to, have generational wealth for a long time, and now I should, make a move.
Yeah, I agree. You got to keep the team competitive, and I don't know. Like they have the they have the capability of keeping competitive. I think between going all in and kind of not waiting, but like making the all in move 2 to 3 years from now, I think I prefer waiting. Um, only because only if like the don't force it. Don't make the all in move for the sake of making the all in move. And I would be more interested in kind of retooling the roster, like making it fit better together with a similar level of talent, specifically trading a certain power forward, and seeing what that looks like with the new team. I think you could still win 50 plus games, and like I mentioned, you get a different matchup or something, and you're I don't know. I that makes more sense to me than really forcing it. But like again, if the Clippers are going to be idiotic and trade Kawhi for a well below market, like go out and try to do that. I just you kind of got to give the general managers benefit of the doubt that other both the Wolves and other teams like they're going to make deals that make sense for them. But yeah, let's move on. I think talking about retooling the roster, I think the point guard position would probably be the biggest place to look, because at exit interviews on Saturday, it was very clear that Finch felt like, I don't know if he used the term or like the original sin on this season was what happened right before the first game where they pull Mike out of the starting lineup and they bring in Dante DiVincenzo. And I think that set the tone for the season kind of in maybe a negative light, where they early on in the season when they should have had continuity, they weren't able to find that. Finch mentioned that it was really good for Dante, and it was. But I think for the rest of the roster, or maybe more so for Mike and Ant, it wasn't necessarily the best thing. And I think they just desperately needed. I don't think the starting lineup needed a point guard. I don't think the starting group needed a point guard. I'm not even sure the closing group necessarily needed a point guard. But the rotation, I think, desperately needed a point guard. And I think that the Spurs series showed that a lot. Like Mike was, despite obviously all the flaws with Mike's game at his current age, like Mike had value in this series because they just needed that type of player. So I think that's got to be like the number one thing you try to find in this offseason is not even a starting point guard. Although, yeah, really, it kind of needs to be with Dante out for the season, or at least a majority of the regular season. I think a starting caliber point guard is what the Wolves will need, in my opinion. I think Finch mentioned that the point guard moving Mike to the bench and going with Ant at the point helped Dante a lot. Well, unfortunately, you can't think about Dante. Dante is going to miss I'll just say, like, from a meaningful regular season standpoint, he's going to miss the entire regular season. And Dante DiVincenzo will not affect your regular season win-loss, and I would probably be dubious about the playoffs too. So I don't think there's as big of a need to get Ayo Dosunmu in the starting lineup. So to me, that leaves a gap in the starting lineup of a starting point guard. And they talked about it in exit interviews. I think the Wolves could really use that type of player, even if like, and why I think it'll be kind of more easy to. They don't need like a point guard that's going to be one of their 4 best players. But I think a starting point guard that in certain matchups you'll want out there for as many minutes as you can have them, and in other matchups you'll go with Ayo Dosunmu in that spot. Right. If in a perfect world, TJ Shannon kind of evolves into whatever you want him to be. I don't know. Like, yeah. I just think they need, at least in their rotation, even if you're starting Ayo, like your 6th man's got to be a point guard. They just need a point guard on the roster. Yeah. Even while like the starting lineup did have success during the season.
Yeah, I'll say this on Two Words Wolves pod. Anytime we talk about the Timberwolves and future and point guard, I like to say that we are anti-Ja Morant podcast here. That we've talked about this before. This is not a guy that we're hoping to get, just given the price and the price tag that comes with them. But talking about point guards, though, yeah, I do agree with you. I also said this as well too in my notes, is that I feel like based on a lot of the exit interviews, I mean, it was Finch, I think Nas, even Jaden all mentioned that the Wolves like function better with the traditional point guard out there. Now, does that mean that they have to start and close with one like you said? No, but Bones clearly isn't the answer. I mean, he is not a point guard. Like, let's just kind of put that out there. And even just given you look at how he barely even popped up
Bone
in the second round.
Bones is a solid eighth, ninth man. It's like it's not about Bones, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not about Bones, and so he isn't the answer. You said Dante, as we know, isn't around to kind of fake being a point guard, or at least filling those roles. And Mike Conley will be 39 years old by the start of next season. If he is to choose to stay in Minnesota. So, I feel like with that said, it's like, well, what is still out there? There's plenty of guys I could think about in terms of trades. I think I made a joke on Blue Skies. Is this the time that the Wolves bring up for the gajillionth time, bringing back Tyus Jones to Minnesota again? As someone that
rather just bring back Mike.
Yeah, as someone that's not from Minnesota, I don't have that close tie to Tyus. Don't call me Tyler Jones. And like Trey Jones is cool too, I guess. But like I feel like that. We don't need to do that again. Tyus is kind of what he is, and should we dust off? Look, where's Monty Morris right now? Maybe Tim Connolly still got his phone number. But no, I mean, I think I don't know of a minimum guy. It's like, let's just have a point guard just to have one on the roster if they're not going to play. If anything, it's like just re-sign Slow-Mo and let him run point guard for a little bit. I don't know. But there is one player that I feel like I do really like that would make sense as on the same salary as I'm kind of jumping ahead here with the Julius Randle salary contract spot. And that would be Jrue Holiday, who makes almost the exact same amount of money. I believe Minnesota have to attach a minimum with Julius's salary to get it. Now, should you be paying Jrue Holiday at his age and wear and tear, $30 million for this year, and I think he has like a player option in the year after. I don't know if that's the wisest use of money, but if you're just talking purely on the basketball court and what Jrue Holiday did this year, who he did miss a considerable amount of games, he would be a great fit as someone that would be on there and kind of fake, I don't want to say fake being a point guard because he's definitely a lot more capable of that than say someone like Dante or any of the other players I mentioned. But yeah, I do think, yes, there does need to be a need for that.
Yeah, I like your Jrue Holiday pick, just purely on the court, but like just thinking about his contract. If he was expiring, maybe that'd make more sense, although trading Julius for an expiring contract would be potentially fraught, given he was the main piece coming back with Karl Anthony Towns. The second main piece is out for most of the season in Dante. But Jrue Holiday is the $37 million player option in 27-28. That's just really tough to like you said. I don't know if he could be played, but like I agree. Like that would be probably a really good just on the court fit. I think in those lineups you could play Jaden off the ball a little more on defense, and that would more matchups. Good example, like the Spurs with De'Aaron Fox, like you'd have more defensive matchups, and certainly I think Jrue Holiday still has enough offensive game for that to make sense. Unfortunately, and this is the case with a lot of players, not even to mention like does Portland want Julius Randle, but I just think the contract would be too onerous there to take back for Julius. But yeah, I mean that kind of segues into our last, or one of our last topics here, is just should the Wolves trade one or both of Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert. And with Julius Randle, I think it has to be a priority to move him. Not you can't punt him. You can't just like what the Nuggets did with Michael Porter Jr. and salary dump him. You can't do that. You need to get some sort of value, whatever his market value. You need to get that back for him. If you can trade him, I think if you can trade him for a starting point guard, obviously if you could trade him for whatever caliber player, like what is Julius, the 60th best player in the NBA? What is the equivalent of that for Julius in a point guard form? And maybe that's Jrue Holiday might be a good comp. Like if you could trade that for Julius, I think or a wing player I think that'd make a lot of sense for the Timberwolves. I just think the relationship with him, the team, everything was just fraught. Basically from the time, I think it was clear, and we all knew it at the time, but I think it was clear when he was in trade rumors at the deadline that really affected him, and he never really got back on track his season from there, and that's got to be on him more than anyone else. And the way he went out in the San Antonio series, they desperately needed him to win this series, and he just gave them nothing. I thought his game 6 was especially with Jordan McLaughlin running around out there for the Spurs. It was a pretty good comp for the D'Angelo Russell Memphis series at the end there. Another game 6 loss at home to end a season, where Finch decides, not even wrongly, to go with Jordan McLaughlin down the stretch instead of D'Angelo Russell. Obviously, it wasn't one for one. The Wolves took out their entire lineup instead of just their starting point guard in this Spurs game. And then maybe another cherry on top is Julius Randle just straight up skips out on exit media. He doesn't speak after game 6, which a lot of people didn't. They kind of, some players were afforded the ability to speak after game 6. And that was treated as their exit interview, and that was communicated to all of us before the game ended. Like the guys that speak after the game will be treated as their exit interview, and we ended up getting fewer guys after the game than we normally would, and that was fine because all of the players that didn't speak, the rotation players that didn't speak after the game, showed up the next day for exit interviews, which is like, that's great. You got an extended time to, like, I think briefly Jaden was supposed to speak after the game, and he ended up speaking the next game. Perfect. The one player of the Wolves' extended rotation, really, of all the guys that played any non-garbage time minutes in the playoffs, Julius Randle was the only one to skip out. It was obviously not a surprising thing that happened. And to be fair, Ant skipped last year. And to be fair again, the biggest reason why they treated the end of game 6 as the exit interviews for players was for Ant, who likely would not have shown up that day. But hey, not gonna criticize Ant this year because he did an exit interview. Julius did not. Julius could have, if Julius wanted to get out of town early, he had the opportunity to speak at the end of game 6. And I don't bring that up to like boohoo the media. To be honest, he wasn't gonna say anything interesting. So like it's not from the immediate point of view. It's more from like just, I think, where he is at mentally with the organization, with everything going on. He just mentally wasn't right, really down the stretch of the entire season. And that to me is just, maybe I'm overrating all this stuff, the interpersonal stuff. And I don't think anyone personally disliked him, and really the entire organization, but the on the court fit and the on the court play from him just disintegrated by the end of the season. And I wonder, maybe I'm overrating this. I just wonder if it's too far gone now, and just almost regardless of whatever you get back, it just needs to be the end of Julius Randle's Timberwolves tenure.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that was kind of annoying to hear. I mean, he talks about the trade deadline rumors, and I felt like, by all accounts, like Julius really wanted to stay in Minnesota this last offseason, when he was a free agent, and he made it work. I mean, he maybe could have gotten larger, annual value of his contract signing elsewhere for a shorter term, but he chose a long-term contract with the Timberwolves, and he talked about how he felt like Minnesota was home for him. He really liked being here. He felt like the team really accepted him, and everything like that. And that's kind of the human aspect of sports, especially sports business. Like, it could be hard. I mean, if Julius was communicated to by Tim Connolly that, hey, it's possible that your name might be popping up in trade rumors, we are discussing trades or other players that you might be involved, that he maybe did take it, really moody. I mean, how often did Ant and Nas and, Jaden talk about, like, especially Nas and Jaden really talked about, like, the moodiness of the team. Like, Nas kept mentioning the moodiness of the team. I mean, he was asked about it, but Nas continued to bring it up. Like, yes, I think that's the biggest thing we need to work on, is the moodiness of the team. And there's not many more moody people on the Timberwolves on the court than Julius Randle. It's very obvious when he's in a certain mood out there. And so, yeah, I mean, like, and there's nothing wrong with being moody. I mean, players have emotional, differences in who they are, mental makeup. But I think, like, there's not really any other reasonable explanation for how he disappeared so bad in the second half of the season. I mean, I think he had a decent April, but just even the playoffs, like against Denver, we felt like, okay, well, maybe he could be a key. And he had a couple good games here and there. I mean, it's not like he stopped trying altogether, but just the effort level, the consistency and focus level just was not there. I don't want to say he was quite quitting on the team. I mean, these are pro athletes. But at the same time, it's hard to imagine, like, the effort he gave in game 5 and 6 against San Antonio was like, a lot of it was just like, dude, clearly, like, he was over it. I tweeted or posted this on Blue Sky that I don't think I've seen a player quit on a team ever this much. Like, Julius Randle was on the Timberwolves since Ben Simmons did to the Sixers. And I said that kind of in jest, but it's hard to watch game 6 and not think of that. I mean, how many times did Julius just not even get over half court, on a turnover and a fast break or on defense, whatever the case. I mean, I think the only reasonable explanation for Julius is kind of, I mean, he is a guy that we understand who struggles against aggressive, very handsy scheme defenses with strong shot blockers in the middle, like a OKC or a San Antonio. I mean, those are the two teams that are kind of that archetype for like how to stop Julius Randle. I think you look at the Warriors without Steph, and you look at the old Lakers from last year. I mean, those are teams that didn't have handsy defenders, nor did they have a shot blocking center kind of there. So Julius really feasted on them. But as we know, the title runs through in the West, San Antonio and OKC, especially starting this year, many years to come. So I think that's we're talking about basketball reasons. Maybe that's why he struggled. But moving forward on Julius, I mean, like, if this is it for Julius, I mean, I think this is something else. I don't like playing social media, detective here, but someone did share that on Chris Hines. So that's one of the assistant coaches that, most notably works with Ant the most, player development coach. He posted on his story basically the day after when the Wolves lost the Spurs. He posted a black story with just text that said, "Discipline and leadership is contagious. So is the absence of it." And like you said, there was one main rotation player that was absent for exit interviews, whether it was, the day after or the day of. And I'm not saying that he's calling Julius Randle out, but it seems like kind of weird timing for that. I do want to give some respect to Jalen Clark and Slow-Mo, who did play some non-garbage time minutes that also did not do exit interviews. But Jalen Clark did post on his story. He said he's at the airport. He said, "Peace out, Minnie. It's been real." He's probably maybe taking a vacation, but we also don't know. I believe he is a free agent, eligible to sign a contract as well, too. So going back to Julius of it, though, Ryan, kind of moving forward in the future. I mean, I talked about Drew Holiday being a near salary match. I watched Detroit get demolished in game 7 today as we're recording, just like the Wolves did in game 6, technically worse. And it makes me wonder, like, do the Pistons want a second scorer? I'm not saying Julius Randle will be of interest to them, but if he is, Isaiah Stewart and Asar Thompson, or Isaiah Stewart and Duncan Robinson, that would be a salary match that does work. I've also heard people talk about Andrew Wiggins, return of our prodigal son, coming back, who also makes about the same salary as well too. Once Andrew Wiggins probably is going to opt into his $30 million contract with Miami next year. That could be a salary match as well too. I don't know about the fit of it, but it would be kind of funny. It would be very Wolvesy to be like, "Hey, look who the old cat dragged back in." So who knows? But yeah, definitely feel like the Randall era in the Timberwolves is coming to a very quick close here.
Yep, I agree. Let's talk briefly about Rudy, and I think another thing this series kind of laid bare is, like, fundamentally, if you're gonna have Rudy Gobert on this roster, this is what I'm about to say is far more criticism of the rest of the roster than it is about Rudy. You just have to be able to maximize him offensively, or to limit his offensive impact as much as possible. And that starts with getting him the ball when teams, specifically with Ant, when teams just blitz Ant. And this series is kind of a bad example, because that's kind of what the Spurs wanted you to do with Wemby sitting by the rim. I think against Wemby specifically, that's just like, you just kind of have to take Rudy off the floor and pair him up with Cornette, unfortunately. But in more of a broad sense, like, to beat, like, with Rudy Gobert on the floor, like, you just have to be willing to hit him. You have to be willing to throw him the pass. And if you're not, I think you just got to trade him. And so, like I said earlier, I don't think they should trade him just to trade him. Like, we're Julius, I think we're both kind of more in that camp. Just like whatever best, throw him on the market. Best case, you get your best offer and you take it. With Gobert, I'd feel more comfortable rolling with him next year and still being a competitive team, certainly with him on the roster. But I think if a team specifically in the Eastern Conference, Detroit maybe even, for one of Randall or Gobert, I think if a team was willing, you're not going to get back what you paid for, nor should you. But, like, if you can get the equivalent of, like, a couple first-round picks for Rudy, or whatever his market value is, if you can get 4 quarters on the dollar for Rudy, I think that would make a lot of sense to do as well. And if that means taking back picks, and, like, if in my theoretical 4 quarters, if you get 2 player quarters and 2 pick quarters to make up your dollar, like, I think that makes a lot of sense. And certainly if you're getting a surplus, if you're getting a 5th quarter, that's great. But, like, where Julius, I might be more willing to only get three quarters back. I think if you can really find a good trade for Rudy, I think that would make a lot of sense too. Trading both of them, I think kind of makes a lot of sense to really reset. Now, the problem with trading Rudy is the Wolves flatly have just not been able to defend with Rudy Gobert on the court. And certainly if you're promoting Naz Reid to the starting lineup, I think in some fundamental way, you're going to have a defensive-minded four, or certainly like you're going to need Ant to step up defensively, and you're going to need your theoretical new point guard to really be a phenomenal defender to cover up for a Naz plus a non-all defensive center. So trading Gobert certainly has more potholes, is more fraught than parting with Randall, but I think it's something the Wolves should look at, not because of anything, really because Rudy Gobert's been so good. It's the opposite of a criticism of Rudy. It's really, I'm not sure the Rudy is the type of center that fits best with Ant. Again, that is more on Ant than it is on Rudy, but ultimately you're building around Ant. So at a certain point, if they're not able to get Ant offensively to pair up properly with Gobert, I think at some level you just got to move him and try to, and really, at least in the short term, at that point you got to get value back for him.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from with that. I just feel like there's no way that Rudy's going to be the one traded this offseason. If anyone is traded, I think just given what's currently on the books right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kind of roll it back, kind of an uninspired, kind of rerun to kind of say, all right, well, we'll just see if everyone can get healthy.
Julius for a guard or a wing, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, right. No, I don't know, but yeah, I think Rudy has been integral as much as how I feel about him. Off the court, some of his political leanings. He's a guy that has been invaluable to what the Wolves have been doing. I think Ant has come to understand that, and there's so many games. I mean, even look at the first round series against Denver. I mean, there's no way the Wolves win that without Rudy, and I think that I understand we're looking at OKC and San Antonio, but the Wolves likely might not even get into a higher playoff seed, nor do they beat some of the earlier round playoff series without Rudy. So I do think he still is going to be needed, unless Johan is taking some super soldier serum this summer and is going to be evolving in some unexpected fashion. The Wolves don't really have anyone on the roster that can make up what Rudy can. I'm not saying that Rudy is a generational defender. There's not really any one or two players that can make up what he does. But that said, yeah, I don't know if like a Miles Turner is anything that's at all appetizing to me. that's even potentially available. So yeah, I mean, I don't have too many other thoughts about on Rudy on that. But yeah, Randall for sure, I think we're in alignment on.
Yeah, I do kind of think Randall, I don't know, does a front court of Naz Reid and Miles Turner work? That seemed, I don't think Miles Turner had a great defensive season. Certainly prime Miles Turner, I think that would make a lot of sense. Certainly you're getting the shooting there. And I'm not saying like trade Gobert for Miles Turner or anything, but I'm more just like projecting lineups, or if you're trading this guy and you're getting that guy back from another deal or whatever. Like I think that I don't know if that would make a lot of sense given how Turner played this last season. But I think the other thing which you mentioned is like offloading one of Randall Gobert, as it opens up playing time for Johan Berenger, which I just think I don't know. I'd be pretty dubious that he's going to be ready to be like an impact playoff player right away at age, what will be 20 or 21. But I think you got to open up playing time for him. And ultimately, I think if, let's just say Berenger is not ready, I think he'll be ready to, like, you put him out there and he's not just going to completely kill you. But like, I think opening up more minutes for Jaden at the 4, I think makes a lot of sense too. And so I think like the best version of this team is still kind of two bigs, where if you keep Gobert and you're rolling with Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert front court, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then having a backup big rotation of like some Jaden at the 4 minutes, some Johan Berenger, some minimum center, or like a $5 million center that you saw. Sure. Like I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're low on point guard minutes and you're low on what I would call wing minutes. Jaden's like Jaden, I think, is really the only like pure small forward on the roster. Like Io's more of a shooting guard wing type player. Like Jaden is really the only like true classic wing that you have on the roster. So I think that'd be a position of need, and Berenger can pick up a lot of the. I mean, if you saw I think it'd be, if you still have Rudy, I think having one of Rudy or Berenger on the court basically at all times would make a lot of sense. But let's move on. Our prey of the season, not prey of the week, prey of the season. Kind of, we already talked about
this.
it. We don't have to belabor it. I put Julius Randle. Leo, who you got?
Yeah, same. I think we already kind of talked about it. I don't really want to talk about him anymore. So.
Yep, I agree. Let's move on to Apex Alpha, our leaders of the pack this season. I put the Minnesota Timberwolves franchise. They win their 5th playoff season in 3 years. They're the only team to both make the playoffs each of the last 5 seasons and win at least a round in each of the last 3. The only other comparable team there is the Knicks, who have won a playoff series in 4 straight seasons, and they played the playoffs 5 out of 6 years, so sneaking in a missed playoffs there to give me my cherry pick number that I like to put out there. Yeah, I mean, look, the last 3 seasons are the golden era, and I think will continue to be the golden era of Timberwolves basketball. There likely will not be, let's hope Ant is on the team for another 5, 6, 7 years. This will end up being at the start of 2022 will be the best decade of Timberwolves basketball in our lifetimes. I think that's very likely, if not a certainty. And I think it's impressive that they have been able to win so many playoff series with a roster makeup that is just fundamentally flawed. The Rudy Gobert Julius Randle pairing, along with the lack of point guard, it's a testament to this franchise that they were able to beat the Denver Nuggets with this roster. And the fact that they've won playoff series with their front court being some combination of Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, and Julius Randle, at like 2 of those players at all times, those are 3 of the most like derided front court players in the entire league. Certainly Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, but to a lesser extent Julius Randle. All those guys are not very popular NBA players and receive far more mocking than they do. And the Wolves have won with all of those guys and have beaten very good teams with all of those guys. I kind of point out this, like in the first round 2 years ago, they blow out the Phoenix Suns, sweep them out. Last year, they beat the Lakers in 5 games, and by the 5th game, the Lakers looked like the Wolves looked in Game 6. They had quit. Yeah. And this year, they more or less blow out the Denver Nuggets in Game 6. And I think a lot of the takeaways from that has been like, well, those teams weren't actually that good. Certainly, I'll kick those teams while they're down too. But I also think like maybe those teams were actually, maybe Phoenix aside, those teams actually were kind of good. And they looked bad because the Wolves were that good. And so I think the Spurs series is a disaster. Not a disaster, but like it's not a good look, and you need to look yourself in the face about the series and all that. But like setting that aside, the Timberwolves have been a damn good basketball team for certainly 3 years, but really all 5 years. Like they've had a really solid basketball team all 5 of those years. If they 3 years ago had played anyone else besides the eventual champion Nuggets, they probably, like, you'd have basically 5 straight years of quality NBA playoff basketball. And so I think that should be recognized. Like the Wolves, with some flawed players, have been able to win a lot of playoff games. So even regardless of them not really coming quote unquote close to a title, I think it's been a really fun ride.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the constants of that is Chris Finch, who is my Apex Alpha. I think, I chuckle every time I see on my social media timelines or my group chats, calling for his head, like, we got to fire him. We can't go forward with this guy. It's like, with all due respect to late great Flip Saunders, I mean, he had KG in his prime, technically for 10 years, technically 11, including when they both came back at the end. But Finch has had 6 years of Ant, so just over half of that, right? So I looked at some of the numbers between Finch and Flip. And again, this isn't an indictment on Flip. This is more a compliment to Finch, which wins per season. Finch has won 43 games per season. Flip won 38.8 wins per season. Their win rate, so of that is 57.2% Finch win rate versus Flip 52.1. The playoff win rate is 50% for Finch versus 36% for Flip. Playoff wins per season, Finch wins 5.4 playoff games per season, and Flip wins 2.1. And playoff series wins, Finch has won 5, Flip has won 2. You think about the 2 series wins that Flip had with a prime KG and a very talented Sam Cassell, I guess all-star Sam Cassell, and a late game Latrell Sprewell. I mean, they beat a really young Carmelo Anthony, and then they beat a really old Sacramento Kings team. With all due respect. And then you look at Finch. I mean, who has he led the Wolves to beat? I mean, you're looking at old man LeBron, but you beat Luka last year. You beat
Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic twice,
right.
Steph Curry in a single game, LeBron James, Luka Doncic, like.
Yeah, exactly. It's not comparable. And again, this is not an indictment of Flip. This is a compliment of what Chris Finch has done. And so I don't think he's going anywhere so long as he's able to be made a contract extension offer that he feels is good for him. The Wolves, I think Tim Connolly and Mark Laurie A-Rod don't really want him going anywhere. So hopefully he sticks around. But yeah, I agree with you. This is kind of the golden era of Wolves basketball, and I think Finch is just as important part of it as Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid is, who are those are really the 4 main holdovers during this era. And I guess you could put Tim Connolly obviously in there as well too. Those are like the main guys who have been here to really create this.
Yeah, to your point, I've been kind of going back and forth with people about Finch online, and I think it's insane that people want him fired. And I've been really kind of taken aback by, and I probably shouldn't be, like the number of people that want Finch let go. I just think that's incredibly misguided. It's not to say Finch deserves criticism for how this season went. On some level, like the team didn't try during the regular season, and on some level that's just on the coach. Or like even if it's not his fault, like they did not play up to how good they should have been during the regular season, and so on some level that's on the coach. But ultimately, if what they said is true and the Wolves basically just didn't care about the regular season or didn't put in the work or all that stuff, I fundamentally believe that is on the players more than it's on the coach, especially because Finch was harping on it in the media, and I certainly believe to them behind closed doors, like this, it was just unacceptable at all times. Like, so he's yelling at them, and at a certain point, what do you want him to do? And I think there's fair criticism, like his loyalty to Julius Randle, I think didn't do him well, in not less so in the San Antonio series, just because I think they were out of bullets, out of gas. But like, I get that, and it's not to say he doesn't deserve criticism. I just think I think if you're blaming the coach more than the players for the lack of consistency, the lack of all of that, I think it's misguided. I think it's on the players. Yeah. Specifically, I think it's on the team's best player. And like you said, I think Finch is a really good coach. I think around the league, he's seen as a really good coach, and the Wolves, like some of the fans want, let him go. I think they would be like, a lot of people would go, what the heck are they doing?
Yeah, the grass is not always greener. I mean, you could look at what's going on in Denver as like prime example number one.
That's a perfect point. It's not that you couldn't let go of Finch and find a coach that theoretically could be better or fit better with what the Wolves are doing. But I think people are kidding themselves. I just think if you let go of Finch, to me, the risk of finding a coach that doesn't work is far greater than potentially finding a coach that works better. And I just think you're basically far more likely to find a coach that doesn't work as well than you are to find your Steve Kerr or Mark Jackson.
Yeah, there's a reason that there's such a short shelf life for NBA coaches in the NBA, because of how often it does not work out. Very rarely do you have a coach like a Finch or a Spo, or you can call Tyronn Lue as well too, or whatever, that Steve Kerr, like they've been holdovers for so long, and so I think the Wolves shouldn't undervalue that, or Wolves fans definitely shouldn't undervalue that. So.
Yeah, and for all the people that want to call Finch Mark Jackson and whoever theoretical next coach you prefer, I can give you Mike Budenholzer, and the guy you bring up next is Doc Rivers, and you're where the Bucks are now. So like,
right.
I just think people I just think this is probably, I should just ignore these people, but I think it's just a classic, you're blaming the classic fan thing of blaming the coach when you're not willing to really break down what, I just think fans far too often blame the coach when there's far bigger things going on. But quickly, let's give our playoff predictions for the rest of the playoffs. We are now down to 4 teams. In the West, I'm going to go Thunder over Spurs in 7 in a series that I think will be as good of a playoff series as we've seen in a long time, the Thunder and the Spurs. I will pick the Knicks over the Cavs in 6, and I'm kind of leaving leaning closer to Knicks in 5 than anything else, but I'll pick Knicks over Cavs in 6. An interesting thing with the East in general is before the season, the Knicks and the Cavs were by far the favorites to win the East. And through it all, despite them finishing 3rd and 4th in the East, here they are. The 2 favorites are here again. So that's kind of funny thing. And obviously one of the 2 teams in the West Finals was by far the favorite to win the West. I can't remember who was. The Nuggets were second behind behind the Thunder, and the Wolves made sure that didn't happen. But I'll go Knicks over Cavs in 6, and then Thunder over Karl-Anthony Towns in the Knicks in 6. How about you, Leo?
I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid. I'm going to say the Spurs in 7. I do agree it's going to be an all-timer of a series, hopefully. Just as a connoisseur of basketball, I will be having fun watching this, hopefully before my baby gets here. I think the cat-led Knicks will win in 5 over Cleveland. So similar to you, I do feel like the Cavs just kind of they have too much of a James Harden issue kind of showing up. And then meanwhile, I think the Cat and Knicks will beat the Spurs in 6. I know that's a hot take, but I am saying that because it's scripted. It's been written. Cat is going to fulfill the destiny that Corey Brewer, Kevin Garnett, Kevin Love, and Andrew Wiggins all had of winning a championship after they got traded by the Timberwolves, their next team. Corey Brewer won a championship with the Dallas Mavericks the very year he was traded from the Timberwolves. KG won a championship with the Celtics the first year after. Kevin Love won his, I think 2 seasons after he got traded and his arm got pulled out by Kelly Olynyk. Andrew Wiggins took, was it all of 1 or 2 seasons, right? I think his first season, winning with the Warriors as well too. So I think Cat, it's taken him a couple of seasons, 2 seasons now. He will win a championship and fulfill that Wolves Midas touch destiny.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I'm rooting for. I know I can already see it. If the Knicks win the title, people will get in their Minnesota sports doomerism of, we traded another guy who won a title. I don't care about that. Like, Cat's just, and I'm going to tweet this out hopefully when they win the East. Like, Cat's just a winner guy, man. Like, Cat is fundamentally a winner. Obviously off the court, I believe that, but I believe he's a winning player on the court. And obviously he has his foibles and his shout out stray voltage, right? But like, I just think he's a winning player, and all he needed was his organization to get their head out of its ass and to catch up. And I'm not talking about the last couple of years with the Wolves, because obviously they were successful with him in the last couple of years. I'm more talking about the earlier Wolves, the pre-pandemic Wolves.
Wolves.
Weirdly, the
Wolves,
the pre-Rosas Wolves, and even some of the Rosas years, and obviously the 2020 draft is with Jaden and Ant, and of course Leandro Bomaro really turns it around. But yeah, Minnesota sports has this weird thing of treating their good but not all-time athletes, even some of their all-time athletes, they're not properly respected when they're here, and it's kind of more of a recent thing, because like Kirby Puckett in the 90s certainly was well regarded. But like, I think the perfect example of this is Joe Mauer, who is a first ballot Hall of Fame catcher. Possibly, you can debate, he's possibly the greatest hitting catcher of all time, certainly up there. And by the end of his career, as most 30-year-old catchers do, he ages out of the catcher position, plays first base, and sure, his salary is overcompensating for a slightly above average hitting first baseman, but like, he's one of the greatest catchers, and the Hall of Fame agrees, of all time. And by the end of his Twins career, he was like weirdly derided. People were like almost happy to see him retire, to get, like, he should have been one of the most beloved, and I think retroactively he is now, but like there was this weird thing where people did not like Joe Mauer. And weirdly with the Vikings, like Kirk Cousins kind of gets a little bit of this, and obviously not comparing Kirko to Joe Mauer, but like, Kirk was a solid quarterback for a lot of years, and I think a lot of he had fundamental flaws, and but like, I think like Kirk was a solid quarterback and won playoff games and all that, and I think Cat falls between those two. Not the first ballot Hall of Famer of Joe Mauer, but certainly a better player than Kirk Cousins. And by the end of Cat's tenure here, he was not He was never popular here. People flatly did not like Karl-Anthony Towns. He was not a popular player with the Timberwolves. And my thing, he was not.
I feel like community-wise, like in real life, people liked him. I think on the internet, people did not like him.
Yes, that was certainly. I'm saying like the people that called into radio shows, the people you go on the dude. I talked to so many people. Actually, Dane Moore has a good anecdote about this. His college group chat basically despised Karl-Anthony Towns. Like that type of like kind of Minnesota sports fan that was like more of a casual. Like Karl-Anthony Towns was not a popular player, not a well-respected player during his time with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And that's a bummer because he should be the most, of the last 20 years, he should be the most beloved Timberwolves player in the franchise. Obviously, setting aside Anthony Edwards. And he just wasn't. And that's a bummer. And it sucks that he never really got the love. Dude, after the Dallas series, the whole internet wanted him traded. And I still believe that like the Wolves had to make that trade because of salary cap reasons. But like we're seeing what he could have been here if the salary cap was different and he was here. And so that's just my point on Cat. Like it's just a bummer he never got like the true love. And maybe Rubio kind of got some of this too. And he wasn't kind of there. The disdain for Rubio wasn't there, but like he never got I don't know. I just the way Cat was treated when he was here, I just never felt like he got the love and admiration that he put forth to the organization. And frankly, the Wolves don't win these playoff series without Karl-Anthony Towns, regardless if he's on the roster. The whole reason this works is because they were able to get Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick that became Baron J for him when they traded him, because a lot of other NBA superstars would have asked out post Jimmy Butler when the Timberwolves were tanking. And Cat didn't. And he stayed. And the Wolves, however where they go, the value from the Cat trade will continue to move forward. And that's like the difference between them and a lot of teams who get lucky with a number one overall pick. Like Detroit, the Wolves have talent that the Detroit Pistons don't because Cat stayed. And I just think it's a bummer that
I think this is a good 15 minutes on Karl-Anthony Towns here, talking about predictions here. So, but I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, I love the guy. I think most people who have met him in person, love him, and the internet and casuals probably don't. But I'll be rooting for him for sure as we move forward here.
Exactly, and thank you for I went on enough of a diatribe, but it's what I feel. It's what I believe. So let's close it out with 2 words. Mine is complicated ending. Just kind of a weird ending to the season where, they never had a chance to beat the Spurs, but like also they didn't play nearly well enough and they're a mile behind, but they have a bunch of things that they can improve and low hanging fruit and all that. So it's a weird ending to the season, but also I think they're left with a lot of questions that they'll need to answer, but at least they know that the questions exist.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I think how I'll choose to remember the Wolves season, is probably how gritty they were, especially in that first round against Denver, where basically everyone's health kind of imploded there, and they ended up losing to a generational talent. I mean, you think how many teams had great seasons that lost to Michael Jordan or lost to LeBron James or whatever. I'm not saying Wemby's going to be them, but he is that type of generational talent where it's kind of like it's not an embarrassment that we lost to them. So my 2 words are go Wolves. I know it's kind of how we end the podcast and kind of how, general tagline we like to say. But by the time you're listening to this, I dropped a piece on Candace Hoopus, or published a piece that talked about the fact that I'm going to be having a child, and I feel like this is going to change the way I'm going to be watching Wolves games moving forward. And if you want to give it a read, and curious about if you have any words of wisdom or encouragement for me, definitely go check it out. But I'm excited to watch Wolves basketball is my point. No matter what happens with Randall or what happens with Finch or Ant, whatever the case may be, it's been a fun ride throughout most of my life so far. Surprisingly, it has, I could say in retrospect, it's been a fun ride because we're in the good times now. Had we stayed in the gallows for a while, I might not be saying that now. I probably wouldn't be on this podcast, but I'm going to say go Wolves is my 2 words.
Yeah, I mean, for me for dad, you try to enjoy every minute of it. It's going to be hard. Of course it will. But that's that comes with the territory, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but and I will add, my son, born 3 years ago, my son does not know a world where the Timberwolves either miss the playoffs or lose a first round series.
I love that.
This franchise is 3-0 since my kid was born in the first round.
Hell yeah.
So tall task there to live up for your future kiddo, but yeah, I'm happy for you. I'm looking forward to you joining the ranks, and we can talk fatherhood and the ups and the downs that come with that. But for Leo, I'm Ryan. Thank you ever for listening to this podcast all season. Last 2 years that we've been doing this, really appreciate everyone that listens to this, reads Leo and I's stuff at Canis, supports all the people that come on this podcast with me. Appreciate everyone. Don't know what the short-term future holds. Think I'll try to do another episode this week, another kind of season recap, off-season preview type of episode. But until then, for Leo, I'm Ryan. Thank you everyone for listening.
As usual, get home and drive safe.
Go Wolves.
Hey, you.